Today, Nick and I are near the California coast taking a look at a different kind of cruiser. Today we have the Polestar 3 rear-wheel drive, meaning that we get less performance, but a lot more range. But does that more range come at other sacrifices, and is it worth the trade-off? Today, we're gonna get behind the wheel and find out. What we get in the Polestar 3 is the current flagship, and whenever a flagship gets less expensive, to me that's probably a good thing, as long as you don't lose too much in it. And we're not losing anything up here with the front end design. For me, the highlight is always going to be these Thor hammer-esque lights. We won't necessarily call them Thor's hammer, but we all know they're going to be closely related to the Volvo lineup. Here though, the Volvo EX90 sibling gets more of a open-close design to get those headlights, and I actually appreciate things a little bit simpler. And across the front, even though this is a fairly sporty look, there's not too much going on. I'm getting a little bit of this black and white theme as sort of a minimalist stormtrooper, but not in a terribly bad way. The black hides a lot of those different sensors that are going to be built into this vehicle. We do have the 360-degree camera view, so you can see we have our front camera there. And if you look a little bit closer here under this front lip, what you would expect to be hood is actually sort of a two-piece design, creating an air curtain, making this just as slippery as it can be, all within reason. Because as we come around to the side, it's clear enough that this has not been designed in a wind tunnel, but is taking some of these things into consideration. For those who may not know, underpinnings of this are basically the exact same thing you'll find in the Volvo EX90, which is a much taller three-row vehicle, and here we're getting everything pulled in a little bit tighter. So to be fair, Nick and I, neither of us have children, so worried about the car seats is more of Alex's forte, but for us, we have to make sure that if we have a vehicle of X size, it's got to be X function. And so we do have enough room here for people and objects. Even though we do have a sportier design back here where everything slopes down, it's not too drastic. There are quite a few SUVs, you lose a lot of capacity back here, but this isn't going to be one of them. We'll dive into numbers a little bit further, a little bit later, but one thing that is worth mentioning is actually the layout of this wheel and tire combination. No matter which trim you get, which powertrain, you're going to get a staggered tire layout of 265 width in the front, 295 in the rear. That's your 20 or 21 inch wheel here on the single motor. If you upgrade to the dual motor performance, that's when you can get a 22 inch wheel. But again, here 20s and 21s. And I do appreciate that even though we're not getting as sticky of a tire as we do on that 22 inch wheel, we still get a pretty aggressive look that seems to be a clearly semi-fan design, so that it is going to lean towards efficiency. But we also get a pretty good sidewall here. So this is a sporty, good looking, aggressive driving SUV that doesn't lose all of its tire, and I really do appreciate that. Some other numbers that we'll dive into further are going to be located right down here. A lot of vehicles, you see what trim is it, you can find a badge. Here it's actually just a sticker. We'll call that very Scandinavian for the time being, but I do think it works out pretty well here. And again, 21 inch wheels, pretty wide wheelbase just because of the battery inside. And overall, we've got a really attractive car. But it's not just about the looks, it is about how it works. And around back here, we do have quite a bit of cargo capacity, considering how much legroom we actually give to our passengers. Now, back here, we're looking at about 21 cubic feet as measured, but you can see Nick and I have all of our camera gear back here without too much of an issue. Now, there is going to be a little bit of extra storage here. We will gently move some of this out of the way, but it's not going to be something that you use on a regular basis. It's more of a if you need it. And if you need it, you're probably doing something like grocery shopping, which is where this convenient double fold system is, where you can go ahead and stand this up and hook your individual bags. Now, Nick and I haven't had to use that, but both of us said that's definitely going to be helpful on a trip to the grocery store. Now, if you do have those bags hanging, this is going to be the deepest point here. And if you wanted to, we could actually go ahead and fit one of our larger luggage items here completely under this load floor. The only thing you aren't going to get, and it's not available right now, is if you do get that LiDAR package, which we find on the Volvo, then that's going to get rid of that. I assume they're planning on putting some cameras or some different computer systems back there. Either way, pull this forward. You, your friends, and whatever you're taking out for the day are going to be nice and covered. And we do have a walk-away lock button for those people who don't want to worry about having to click the button, because we don't get a button here. We have a card key. This is that card key in question, but it's not the only way you can get in and out of the vehicle. I imagine most folks are going to use the phone as key function, but once you're in here, it's a pretty nice place to be, and these seats are quite comfortable. They're also very adjustable, but adjusting them can be a bit difficult. Nick, what did you think about the single knob we have here located on the seat?
It's going to be one of those things, once you get used to it as the owner, it might not be as big of an issue. But once you cycle through these buttons, it'll adjust how it's tilted up in the front, the bolster settings, and then you also have massage seats in this.
Exactly. So this is a pretty comfortable layout, but getting set up the first time is a little bit of a pain. Once you set it to your driver profile or your key or your phone, it should be pretty easy. But this is one of those cars that, even though we do have a power adjustable steering column, you're not going to be using any buttons. It's actually all going to be here in the touchscreen. So just things to be aware of. But it's not just about the drivers, it's also about the passengers. And surprisingly, there's quite a bit of room back there. For those who may or may not know, the Auto Buyer's Guide family is pretty large. And even though I'm not the tallest, I'm the one who runs out of headroom the fastest. And good news, I have headroom. And I also have a pretty good view. We have an enormous glass ceiling. That's going to be standard on all models. But I also have a lot of other room. There's shoulder room. There's plenty of leg room. The only thing we're missing is a little bit of leg support because these seats end up being a little bit lower based on the fact that they are built on top of a battery. But whoever it is back here should be pretty comfortable. We even got fold-out armrests with cup holders, USB-C charging, and Nick, you noticed something if you like going up to the mountains.
There is a ski pass-through. So if you have passengers back here, but you need to put your skis, snowboard is not going to fit. But if you need to put your skis through, there is that option, which you really don't find all that often anymore.
No, and if you want to leave it down for easy access, it does have a nice little modesty flap here.
And 3-zone climate control. So you do have air back here. If you get a little claustrophobic, and that roof is not enough for you, you can change that air for those backseat passengers.
And we even have heated seats back here. Under the hood, we aren't going to find a whole lot, but we do get is a cute little storage cubby, and it does have a nice little magnetic folding cover. Now, this is something I would go ahead and pull out immediately to get more space, but what we don't find under this is going to be another motor. Now, that's obviously reserved for the dual motor or the performance model, single motor, rear-wheel drive, exactly where I would put it. And instead of having the massive performance numbers, we are stuck with under 300, but that under 300 is just by a hair. It's 1 horsepower less, 299, and we still have 361 pound-feet of torque. For something like this that has lost a little bit of weight versus that competition, it works pretty well. Powering that, not just that rear motor, is actually going to be the same size battery, which is really where we get that extra range. So 111 kilowatt hours built in. I think we're using about 107 overall. That should get us about 350 miles of driving range. And it doesn't mean it does it slowly. Obviously, the faster you go, the less range you'll get. But we were able to get this under 8 seconds. 7.5 is what it's rated for, and I think it might be a little bit underrated. Overall, though, still a ton of fun to drive. And as I mentioned, rear-wheel drive is the only way I would want it. But if you are out on that road trip, just like we are today, basically driving up and down that California coast, charging is going to be the exact same as we get on that dual motor because we're using the same other components. That means 10 to 80% should be in just about 30 minutes. And the longer you are there, or the same amount of time, gets you more miles because this is more efficient. Overall, that's a pretty good win. Time to get this out on the road. The first thing we're gonna do is punch it, but that punch is less than maybe we would like. Now, we are crawling through the hills here. A lot of what we've done is elevation climbing, but compared to that dual motor, this just doesn't have it.
Yeah, it's not as aggressive. It doesn't feel like it's fighting the road to find traction. I like that dual motor, especially with that extra performance. But I don't find that this is anything lackluster of what you would need in an everyday driver, especially if you are just wanting a luxury style SUV.
We're just under 300 horsepower, so I'll call it 300. Plenty of torque. It's a little bit lighter. We're looking at a couple 100 pounds lighter than we get in the dual motor. But actually, the biggest difference for me isn't the overall performance. I don't think people punch it from stoplight to stoplight all the time. Let me know if I'm wrong, but for me, it's actually gonna be the driving experience with a little bit of a different weight distribution and a very different suspension. No longer do we have the air suspension here, not even available. It's gonna be a standard spring suspension. Obviously, it has good dampening, it's well balanced, but there's a lot more being communicated into the cabin than we got with an air suspension.
They still have variable dampers, so it does have some sort of adjustment given the road conditions. You also have tuned anti-roll bars that are going to make it feel just a little bit more stiff. And something I found interesting today when they were giving us the overview of the vehicle is that even when they were producing the dual motors with the air suspension, they tuned the air suspension to feel like a sprung suspension. So even though they were going that luxurious route with that air, they weren't necessarily going for that soft, supple ride like you'd find like an S-Class or some sort of large luxury vehicle. They were doing the air suspension to get extra ground clearance, to have that adjustability, not necessarily for the cushiness, but that is kind of what you get with air suspension. So not having that, it is a little bit rougher. You do feel a little bit more feedback through the road. And again, like Travis mentioned, not having that front motor, it's about 400 pounds lighter. So you're really going to start to feel that as you're carving through the canyons like we are now. But you're only going to really notice it a whole lot when you're pushing the vehicle to its limits, which we don't have the performance pack. We don't have all that extra goodies like bigger tire or stickier tires and the air suspension helping us out with the body roll. So it's not going to be as nimble, but this still provides a great driving experience, especially on tight turns.
Yeah, it's tons of fun behind the wheel. And like I said, at no point have I really needed more power. There's just an obvious drop off. And I think it is worth mentioning that power differential is because we're missing the front motor. The rear motor happens to be exactly the same, but one thing we get in the dual motor is a trick rear axle. So that's going to be a total disconnect for when they want to run a single motor for more efficiency, but it also is torque vectoring. And so the dual motor doesn't feel as limited in all-wheel drive form as a lot of other EVs do. So the trade-off here isn't a way better driving experience because it's already pretty good. I don't mind it though. At no point have I said, oh, I really wish I had the dual motor. It's just, if you pay more, you can get a little bit more. But if you pay more in this model, you can get the same kind of feature set as you do on the other trim levels. And a lot of that has to do with the Plus package, which to me, I understand it not being standard, but I think that's going to be easily the most selected option across the entire lineup. We've got a huge list, and Nick, help me out with this. 25 speakers, it's a Bowers & Wilkins system.
Even speakers in the headrest.
Yep, we've got acoustic glass, we've got infrared laminated windshield, active noise canceling, heated rear seats. The seats that we have right now are the Napa leather upgrade, which is only available if you get the Plus pack. And that gives us massaging seats, which I'm using right now, and ventilation. And if you want, you can ventilate and heat at the same time. I think if you were to ask a customer to drive these back to back, the two things you would hear are probably going to be the performance 0 to 60 and the ride comfort. So for me, if I had to pick, do I want a more powerful motor in this model or do I want a more comfortable suspension? I would probably take that more comfortable suspension. So if that's something that we see down the road, obviously this is really the first iteration of the Polestar 3, and this is the second version, only the single motor. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that coming down the road. But would you take power or comfort?
I would probably take power, but again, if I was more on the family side, like if I had kids and I was going to be using this for road trips, then I would probably go for the single motor where you get that 350 miles of EPA rated range. That is going to be a huge game changer, and that is EPA rated. That's not real world. I mean, granted, they use real world numbers, but you know what I mean. Like, it really just depends on how you drive the vehicle, the conditions outside, the roads. So if you can get the extra, 30 to 40 miles
Miles
on
total.
a charge compared to the dual motor, I think that's probably going to be a sell point for a lot of people.
The only downside is that we haven't been able to test that out here because this is not the road for fuel economy. Obviously, this is nice and twisty, and we are having quite a bit of fun. It's a great car to drive, but the other thing is it's a lot of elevation change. So unfortunately, we can't give you a better number on that, but trust us, it's going to be a little bit better, but it's not any better, or it's not more better. Please don't come at me for that one.
Grammar police.
It's not more better because of how good the disconnect is in the dual motor. So that's a bit of a drawback for me. I just wish it was a larger gap because it is, less of a feature set, but still, overall, pretty good. And I wouldn't mind having one of these in the driveway.
I'm really impressed. I love this vehicle. And this is probably one of, if not my favorite electric cars I have driven. That's a bold statement.
One feature set that unfortunately I've had to dial in and turn back is going to be some of the nannies that come with this vehicle. Obviously, this is going to be a brand that's still very focused on safety, but it does not like carving these canyon roads, so the lane assist was turned off. But a lot of that is going to be built in standard here with the vehicle. 360-degree camera, obviously you have sensors, adaptive cruise control, all built in standard. The one thing we're missing that we find over on the Volvo counterpart is LiDAR. Now, as far as I'm aware, that LiDAR isn't currently active. I think it might be working in the background, but isn't fully integrated. But it's supposed to be coming to the Polestar. We just won't see it this year. So that's one of those things I kind of wish they had already built it into the vehicle if they were going to include it later, turn it on via software. But if you don't want it, don't need it, and don't mind not having a little hump right over at the top of the windshield, then now's a good time to go ahead and get your Polestar 3. This single motor variant now means the Polestar 3 is more affordable than ever. Starting at $68,900, including your destination and delivery, that means it's about $6,000 off, and that's a pretty healthy chunk of change. I will admit the driving experience is a little bit different, but not in a way that I would say is negative, just maybe not as premium, but you didn't pay as premium of a price tag. It also has the exact same feature set and option list as you will find, minus a little bit of the performance bump in the performance pack and some bigger wheel and tire options. But for me, the experience is absolutely still here. And I would probably get my Polestar 3 with a rear-wheel drive, and if I was going to spend that extra money, it would go into some of that feature set. Nick, what do you think? Is this the one you would go for, or would you fork over a little bit more for that performance?
You know, having that Plus pack where you get the Bowers & Wilkins 25 speaker sound system, I honestly think I might save that extra cost and get the dual motor, as I think performance is a little bit more of the forefront of importance in my book.
Really, it's going to come down to where your preference lies, and the good news is that Polestar now has an option. Until they have more models, then a little more variety within their lineup is never a bad thing. Let us know down in the comment section, would you go performance? Would you go for some of the luxury experiences? Or are you waiting for a whole other Polestar model because there are more coming down the line? Or for a real wild card, would you go for the EX90 with more seats, more storage capacity, and actually very similar performance, just a bit of a different vibe? Let us know down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, our new podcast over on YouTube, or your favorite podcast sites. Until next time, we'll see you down the road.